Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on Conversational and Generative AI in Contact Centers. Today, I'm joined by Eli Federman and Ankit who are going to be talking to us about AI. To get us started, I'm going to go over a couple of housekeeping things. This session is being recorded and will be sent to all participants after the webinar. Listen-only mode is enabled during the presentation. If you have any questions or comments, please submit them during the chat. The chat should be a pop-out for you. And you're welcome to ask any questions, and we'll ask them at the very end in the Q&A session. Okay, Eli, it's over to you, and I'm going to come back for the Q&A at the end.
That sounds great, Courtney, and thank you. A warm welcome to all of our participants today. If you've joined us on a previous Engage webinar, welcome back. So Ankit and I are going to talk about a really hot topic in our space. We're going to be discussing AI in contact centers. You can see the agendas in front of you. I'm going to walk us through conversational AI to start, and then Ankit is going to take us through generative AI. The focal point for me on conversational is essentially twofold. We're going to talk about the IVR, where this technology can have a substantial impact, and equally so in shaping real-time employee-customer interactions. Finally, we'll tell you a little bit about Bank of America's infamous virtual assistant, Erica, so you'll have a little bit extra evidence of conversational AI in successful action. Then I'll turn it over to Ankit, and on the generative side, our focus is going to be primarily on knowledge management. This is where we really feel frontline employees can get tremendous support through this very interesting and progressive technology, and we'll get much more detailed about ADA as well. Finally, there'll be a few takeaways as you process all of our discussion today, and we welcome any additional Q&A both during and after the webinar. So with that being said, let's start with a short overview of what conversational AI is, or as I like to use as an acronym, CAI. So in the simplest sense, what CAI is trying to do is replicate human-like interaction as a bot. And it's trying to do this successfully to make conversations between people and systems go much more smoothly and successfully. The way in which it's primarily deployed is via chatbot or virtual assistant. So let me take you through how conversational AI works. There is essentially 4 building blocks. Conversational AI starts with automated speech recognition. Now, speech recognition has been around for quite a while. And what conversational AI does is it really takes it to the next level. So this iteration of speech recognition is primarily about listening to what we as a customer might be saying. As we move into building block 2, and we talk about natural language understanding, this is where the technology really takes off. It's paying attention to not just the words that are being said, but it's listening to tone, inflection, nuance, and it's using its own learning mechanisms to figure out the context behind the words that are being used. So this first half is listening and comprehending. Then what the AI is going to do is figure out, okay, how do I deliver a response that's going to address the question that was asked? It does this first through a process called dialogue management, where it's interpreting and running all of what it just learned through all of its neural engines to figure out what to say. And then finally, it leverages natural language generation to deliver what is hopeful to be an accurate response that tells the customer exactly what they were looking for. This is a snapshot of conversational AI. As we move forward, let's look at it a little bit more in action. So the first place that this technology has been deployed is in the IVR. The interactive voice response platform has been around for a long, long time. And while it's improving, it has room for much more improvement. And when this technology is deployed, it really does have an opportunity to transform the way that an IVR works. So there's 4 key areas in terms of how this technology shapes the IVR. The first is, as we just talked about, it's the natural language processing engine. And this is much different than traditional speech that's been used in the IVR, which used to function a little bit more like a Q&A. But unlike CAI, it doesn't take into account all of that nuance around the language, the tone, the inflection, the context. That's where this engine is much stronger, better, and more mature. Additionally, there's some other benefits that come with this technology. You've got voice biometrics, which basically is where your voice becomes a footprint for authentication. And if we think about how complicated authenticating in the IVR can be, this can really transform the experience as well as shorten it, building huge efficiency and improving CSAT along the way. Furthermore, if the NLP is deployed in the right way and the CEI is working to its fullest potential, you naturally will have customers more easily being able to function in the IVR, therefore doing a lot more self-serve, which will give an organization even more incentive to drive increased capability. Finally, these tools come equipped with some very robust analytics, so you start to understand in depth, where are things broken in the IVR? Why did customers leave when certain things were said or when they were navigating in a certain component? So all of this together translates into very substantial impact. We've listed a few KPIs that we see improving when this is done well. The first is containment. So as we think about customers who only want to serve in the IVR, do they end up doing so? Average speed of answer. Naturally, if you can contain more calls in the IVR, you're going to free up your frontline employees, and it should be a little easier to forecast and ultimately answer calls more quickly. And then finally, there could be a huge lift in terms of overall satisfaction via NPS. And if you're measuring IVR uniquely, which we'd encourage you to do, you should see a lift in terms of IVR experience. I will say from a lot of recent experience, if you bank or have a credit card with Amex, I would suggest that they're one of the stronger enterprises who are successfully deploying NLP in their IVR today. Okay, moving along, let's look at the second way we've seen conversational AI work and work quite well in terms of servicing a contact center. So what you have in front of you is a technology called Cogito. Cogito has been in the marketplace for a number of years. And they focus on two components of how to assist frontline employees in real-time interaction. The first is pace. They have cues, which you should be able to make out through the visuals, which basically will give notice that you might be speaking too quickly, or you're not coming across as clear. And what that does is it gives a very helpful trigger for an employee to maybe pause, catch their breath, rethink about the language they're using, and alter the pace in real time to ensure that they're staying well connected with the customer. The second thing, and I think the real differentiator with this kind of technology, is a focus on empathy. Empathy remains one of the biggest areas of opportunity when interacting with frontline employees, certainly by my very recent experiences with a number of global brands. This technology tells you instantly by analyzing how the customer is responding in terms of words, tone, inflection. It's making real-time decisions to indicate if you're being empathetic enough. And if you're not, it's going to trigger a cue. So in both cases, there's an opportunity to reshape a conversation in the moment. And that's what really separates this kind of technology. A number of KPIs can be improved by using it if it's deployed the right way. Again, we've got potential to improve CSAT, NPS, transfers. This is a big one. If you think about a moment in time when a frontline employee doesn't feel like they can find the right answer, or they're getting flustered because the pace of the conversation has gone south and customers are getting impatient and they want to get out of the conversation, well, they're no longer positioned to resolve it. And oftentimes that becomes a transfer. This technology can help both transfers and call resolution improve. And finally, average handle time. I want to be thoughtful here. This technology is not meant to get employees stressed out about finishing a call in a certain amount of time. It's more about the holistic view of taking the right amount of time to have the right conversation for the right outcome. Ultimately, average handle time would be expected to improve as more efficient conversations are being held. And then finally, before I hand it over to Ankit, we just wanted to show you briefly what Bank of America has done in terms of Erica. Erica is their full-service virtual assistant. It is a virtual assistant that interacts seamlessly with their live chat bots, as well as with frontline employees at their various global contact centers. You can see some of the very impressive statistics below, which really stand out just in terms of the volume of transactions per day, over 32 million users in 5 years, and based on their internal measurement, over 90% efficacy. This really stood out to us in our research, and so we wanted to also highlight it, knowing that we have a number of financial services clients, and this appears to be a leading edge application of conversational AI. With that being said, I want to thank everyone so much for listening and for joining us, and I will hand it over to Ankit to take us through an overview of generative AI. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Eli, and welcome everyone to our webinar. A lot of us have heard this buzzword, generative AI, throughout the past few weeks. It's all over our feeds. It states that it's going to transform the way we do business. But what we wanted to do is really build on top of what we have heard and really break it down and unpack what actually generative AI is and how it's going to affect us going forward, what leaders should be thinking of when thinking about this technology. So let's dive a little deeper into what generative AI actually is. It's basically a set of machine learning algorithms that enable computers and systems to generate new content using existing images, text, video, audio, or even code. Think of it as the models are trained on a huge set of database, and then they try to mimic human conversation or human output through these systems. The main objective of this whole system, I would say, is to utilize patterns that it has been trained on and start generating net new content for the user. And what we have, I'm sure most of us have already used ChatGPT for a bunch of our research. Some of us would have used for just playing around, testing the system. So with that in mind, what we wanted to see is what are essentially the building blocks for generative AI. And if one goes and researches, you'll see a lot of technical nuances. You'll see some heavy tech language. But what we wanted to showcase here is how you would explain it to a 4-year-old as to what generative AI actually is and how it's deployed. So at the center of the system is basically training and transforming the database and forming a database, I would say. This is where the heart and soul of generative AI lies. It's how you train the database, and think about it from a perspective of huge billions and trillions of data sets that these models use to get up to speed and identify patterns. They use something called as large language models, LLMs, and using that, they understand the intricacies, nuances, context, and then start forming outputs for the user to start using. And the one critical thing is, if there's one takeaway from this entire presentation, is as leaders think about deploying generative AI in their organizations, having a solid data strategy and ensuring that you have a very robust data set will be important to really highlight the efficacy of this system. And it's truly transformative, but how much data can the system, how much amount of good data the system can use, that will be very important. So that is where the training and forming the database comes into picture. Following that, it's designing a prompt. If you maybe after the webinar, one of you can go to the chat GPT, you say you design a prompt, like tell me something in the XYZ region. So that is basically designing a prompt. It tells the system to go back to the database and find the most appropriate response for the query. Highlighting the context, really specifying the task improves the system and lets it get the most accurate response, I would say. And using all of that, it finally generates a response, and it could be in the form of text that is brand new, images. You would have seen some really cool AI generated images that look like real life images, audio or video. And the one real important factor here is this technology is really nascent right now and it's still evolving. And after the generation of the response, this is where the human in the loop comes into the picture. The system tries to learn from the user that the how accurate the response was to the query or the intended query that the user had. And this feeds back to the database and lets the model train upon and really understand more nuances as it goes along. So it's going to be a journey for the system to come really accurate, and having a human in the whole process is it's going to multifold the application of this system. And as we go along, what we wanted to see is how this technology is going to impact the contact centers. And we have identified two places right now that are of real interest to us and could be really transformative as we go along. So let's look at how the generative AI can optimize the knowledge management systems utilizing your enterprise data. What we have seen often is as organizations grow, the the product articles, the product manuals, customer interactions, training modules become too big to handle. They are passed out in different systems. Sometimes the processes are broken. And what this actually leads to is underconfidence for the frontline employee while serving the customer. And a majority of their brain space is actually utilized in understanding where to get the information rather than really understanding what the problem is and how to really resolve the customer query. And what generative AI helps is we've come across a system from Level AI called as an agent GPT. This is what you're seeing. It really self-learns on your enterprise data that has been collated over a long period of time, can talk to various systems, and then starts assisting the frontline employee while they are serving the customer. What it essentially does, I would say, is from a broad universe of data sets that currently is in the organization, it gives you potential solutions, and that can be used by frontline employees during their customer interaction, and also gives you links to articles or FAQs that it has actually utilized to come up with the solution. And the one point that I mentioned in the earlier slide around having a human in the loop, the system creates that feedback loop through employee feedback. If the frontline employee was able to use one of the solutions, it gives a positive thumbs up so that it can be used again by somebody else. Or if it gives a thumbs down, it lets the system know that maybe that was not the best solution. We need to find a better solution. And this whole training of the system will eventually lead to a point where the system is really accurate based on the customer query and gives assist the frontline employee while they are conversing with the customer. And it really frees up the time for, I would say, frontline employees to not worry about how accurate the information is, where to go find the information. It helps them focus on the core task of serving the customer and then helping them resolve the query. This is where it will enable them to be more empathetic and resolve those customers' queries. Some of the KPIs that it would impact is average hold time, given it understands while the customer is speaking around what the query is and starts forming a possible solution in real time. transfers the information. If it's accurate, the first employee that serves the customer will really service them, no need for internal transfers. And then one of the biggest KPIs is the first call resolution, which we have seen is really important to have an efficient contact center operation. So as we move along, there was another really interesting solution that we came across was Ada. Ada is a leader in chat solution, and what they have done is partnered with OpenAI recently, the parent company for ChatGPT. And using their large language models, they've launched a customer service suite, which is powered by generative AI. Often we've seen the workload or the inflow of queries in customers' contact centers has increased considerably, and there is an increasing need to automate certain workflows so that the overall efficiency increases and you can service the customer. And customers have become really demanding. They want solutions right now and in an instant. And also with the digital savvy generation, all of us are looking for some form of a chat solution. Most companies have started deploying it, but the biggest problem that we have seen is there is standardized responses, no personalized information. Sometimes, if not implemented correctly, it can go the wrong way. And the moment your chat is not right, it then directly impacts the traditional contact center operation because the customer is going to call in. And what Ada does through this new solution is really points the generative AI models to your organization's data set, the repository, the previous customer interactions, some product manuals, and starts interacting with customers in a voice that is apt to your brand. It lets you define the voice, it lets you be the brand voice, and comes up with solutions in real time that can help the customer. And I would say having a chatbot that can resolve certain tasks that are repetitive is going to be a game changer. Effectively resolve, that's the key word. And then it lets the frontline employees really focus on complex, high value tasks that requires more problem solving and not just spitting out information from a system. And the other cool part about the whole solution was often contact centers have a very separate voice across different channels. And what it truly does is brings you closer to that omni-channel experience. Using this technology, what you could do is whatever solutions are in your chat can be replicated across the voice systems as well. And it really reduces the time to use the same technology across multiple channels. And some of the KPIs that are impacted through this would be the average speed of answer, given chatbot is available 24/7 and can answer the customer queries without being tired. Average speed of answer, reduced call volumes can lead to that. And overall happiness and net promoter score would definitely be impacted through this. And with that, I would pass it over to Eli for taking us home.
Ankit, thank you so much. Very insightful and very exciting to see the evolution of this technology. So we'd like to leave you with 4 things to be thinking about. The first is AI, there is no question, can be an enabler for frontline employees and can support them in multiple ways with the real focus right now on efficiency and productivity. The second one is self-serve really has a chance to be expanded, both in terms of capability and improved in terms of experience via both IVR and chat, which is really quite exciting in our space. The third is there's this ability, Ankit was talking quite a bit about the importance of data. Well, being able to leverage that data, both institutional and customer, and do it in the right way for both learning and execution in terms of experience will be another key takeaway if introducing this technology into the contact center. And then finally, we've been seeing a lot of maturation in terms of automation in the contact center. Well, contact center automation fits like a glove with AI. And there are technologies and vendors out there who can work together to deliver a unique and integrated solution that gives you both the experience and productivity you can get from both AI and automation. So with that, that closes the formal part of this webinar. Thank you again, everyone, for taking your valuable time out of your day to spend with us. And we do have some time left for some Q&A, and we look forward to trying to answer your questions.
Eli and Ankit, thank you for sharing all of your insights. We have the chat open if anyone would like to ask any questions, but we have a couple of questions that came through in the registration period. So the first question is on how to leverage AI or ChatGPT as a live chat agent to provide real effective answers to customers.
Thanks a lot, Courtney, on that. I think the biggest piece around how to use the generative AI or ChatGPT is really start understanding some of the use cases within the contact center that require this form of solution, and then pointing the generative AI models to understand what the current answers are, and then really training the model effectively to give you that right solution. Like we mentioned, in Ada, it's one of the technology providers for chat solution. Having combined generative AI in their product suite, what it could essentially do is take the entire institutional knowledge, learn itself, understand some of the nuances, and when the customer comes across with the context or the problem, using these training models, it can start answering those questions. So it's really effective in terms of when it's trained correctly. So the better the data set that it is trained on, the more correct or the more accurate the answers would be. And the additional point is that in the nascent stages, there will be a human that needs to approve of those answers, given that is one place that this technology is still evolving as to how accurate the answer is. And given once chat becomes customer facing, it's almost like you are representing the brand. So it needs to be really accurate in terms of how it answers. One is how it answers the question, and two is what the answer is.
That's great. Great answer. Thanks, Ankit. Eli, is there anything that you'd like to add?
I would just, I thought that was really well said. Thank you, Ankit. Just as we think, I think that the question was around the conversational piece as well. When I think about, what a chat experience looked like, 10, 15 years ago, the conversational component really matures that quite a bit. And I think it does, I don't think, but it moves the interaction from feeling really transactional, and it's already a bit of a transactional channel. I think just the ability to create more dialogue versus question and answer is really where the technology can start to make a notable difference on the experience.
Great. Thanks, Eli. So the next question that came through in the registration process is, should contact centers focus their efforts on AI-supported assistance to free up agent occupancy for complex inquiries?
So, I would humbly suggest that because this technology is new, I like to lean towards start with simple and easier transactions first. I truly believe that when it comes to very complex interactions, we still need to lean on the ever important human being to best handle them. Where I think the huge opportunity is in our space is what to do with so many of those interactions that frontline employees handle, where they could be doing a much more mature conversation and or selling. And so if you were to ask contact center executives, I'm willing to bet that at least 30 to 40% of those interactions could be offloaded to this kind of technology. So I would say mature the process by starting with very simple transactional use cases, And then as you get closer to more moderate, find out what the right threshold is in terms of still leaning on your frontline employees to do what they do best.
Okay. Thanks, Eli. Anything you want to add, Ankit?
No, I think that's perfectly told.
Great. So we have a question in the chat from Denise. Thank you, Denise. Can you share any information or your personal experiences on how companies are addressing governance issues around generative AI?
Thanks a lot, Denise, for
Great
that question.
Go ahead, Ankit, please.
Yeah. Feel free to add, Eli, in terms of some governance issues whenever a new technology is handled. Specifically to generative AI, what we are seeing is there's some risk associated in terms of legal and privacy, and how companies are addressing them is really leaning on to their technology departments and their legal departments to understand what this technology could imply. I think given the nascency of this technology, we are yet to see a concrete example of how these are affecting. But with any kind of, think about it from a technology deployment standpoint. We trust the companies who take our data, who take our enterprise data. If we take any kind of, say, Salesforce, it takes in all the enterprise data, and then the company is relying on the tech departments to really verify how secure it is, how private it is, and ensuring that it is not transferred across the different enterprises. Similarly, with this technology, it sometimes can come across as a black box, but having a chief technology officer who is well versed with this technology really helps these companies address these issues. And then there is always the legal side of it, some data privacy laws that is always dependent upon the legal departments.
Great, thanks, Ankit. Eli, anything that you'd like to add?
It's well said, and I can see that Anoop's follow-up question is very similar, and I've had these discussions with several leaders in the last few weeks. I think part of this will depend on industry. I think if you're in financial services or insurance, you're going to need to go a little deeper and be that much more careful. You're going to have risk teams that are going to challenge whether or not there is secure transmittance of data. So I would offer a couple of thoughts. The first is, this progressive technology, it works best in cloud-based environments, right? So if you're still have a premise solution, I think you just naturally run into a few more obstacles just around where data is being sent and received from, where it's being stored, different network centers that it's going to. The cleaner environments, I think, will have a bit of an easier time. And what's critical is that ensure that whichever vendor you're working with, that they are being challenged to answer very direct questions on exactly where the data is going and how it's being handled, and ensure that they are clearly aware of all of the different regulatory and compliance scenarios that exist and are required in your state, in your province, in your country, across the globe, so that they're considered. This is also something that concerns us, and it is an evolving question. That's something that we need to stay very close to.
And Anoop, I like the question around regulated environment. What we have seen right now is if you are using, and I would not call it open source, but if you're using a fruit tool like ChatGPT, I would refrain from entering any kind of private information. We don't know where that information goes. We don't know how the models are using that information. However, the moment you enter a enterprise deployment or a enterprise solution, that is where the technology provider has some guardrails, has the safety rails to protect that kind of information. What we've seen is these companies at least ensure that your data is private to your organization and is not transmitted across, so that the models can learn. And if a company is thinking about deployment, I think being really tight on risks and having those guardrails that apply to your organization and putting them across to the vendor would be important as we handle secure information.
Thank you both for your great answers, and thank you, Anoop, for your question. We still have some time for some more questions if anyone else wants to add them into the chat. But I think,
oh,
there we go.
Thomas, under the wire.
Thanks a lot, Thomas, for the questions.
Yeah, please.
Particular industries, I would say it's not more so about the industry, it's more about service lines. Customer service is probably one of the biggest use cases for generative AI, and how across the board in different functional areas, this technology can be really transformative. It can be customer facing, it can be assisting the employees. And the second one that comes to mind for service lines is really operations. Any place where systems are doing repetitive tasks or mundane tasks, these technologies can understand those contexts, be trained on those tasks, and take over that from the humans in organizations, I would say.
Yeah, and Ankit, I would add, for us, knowledge management is really, it is primarily where generative, we think anyway, is going to work and work best in terms of service delivery. And so, as we're thinking about that, it's going to be real. You think about knowledge management, and today we come across so many different enterprises where getting information is coming from multiple sources, and how that information is presented is not always clear. Finding that information through any type of search functionality, it's up and down. The notion here is that this technology can really centralize and make all of that so much more easy. So you're not thinking about it. And you could even introduce a bot, you can even introduce automation into that equation to make the whole thing even more robust and really remove the burden from the frontline employees. So it's a great question. And I think that's exactly where everyone needs to be playing. And I too don't think there's an industry per se. Some industries will have a bit more concern in terms of risk, but in terms of just using this tool to improve the ability to answer questions more easily and quickly, I think it's industry agnostic.
Great answers, and thank you, Thomas, for your question. So it looks like that's the last of our questions. So unless someone else wants to sneak in at the very last minute, I think that we've reached our end. So thank you, Eli and Ankit, for sharing all of your insights.
Oh, wow. Another one just came in. Sorry. I think, yes.
Okay. So this is from Chandan. Have you noticed any particular discussion of customers or people not trusting or accepting AI-driven decisions, algorithm aversion?
I just want to be sure I'm clear. So is this just if I'm interacting with an IVR, or sorry, if I'm interacting with an IVR and I know that I'm speaking with someone who's dependent on AI and natural algorithms, is the notion that I just might not want to interact and just speak to a person because I'm not trusting that they'll do right by me? I almost have a follow-up question to make sure I'm clear. Sorry, Chandan, I hope that makes sense. I can say that I don't know. Yeah, okay. So yes, I think there is some truth to that. I think there is a little bit of bot aversion right now when it comes to service. And that's why I made the point earlier that it's really important to remember that frontline employees are still going to have a big time role to play in terms of service delivery, at least we think, in the near and long-term future. I think it's just about repositioning where they can have the best impact. And I certainly trust AI, but I think it's a hard one to answer because the reality is that it's a very personal decision. But it feels to me like research I've seen has suggested that the majority of us are willing to experiment. It's the experience that's going to determine whether or not we'll be a repeat user. And that would be the piece that I would focus on. Ankit, welcome your additional input.
Yeah, I think the additional part I would want to highlight, Chandan, is this is almost an aversion to any new tech that comes across. The first reaction is always, oh, do I trust it? As the tech evolves, as it's deployed, and once we see really concrete one use cases to productivity gains, that's when people are going to start trusting and accepting AI-driven decisions. And given the technology is so new, having this having a concept of human in the loop becomes even more important because it's being validated by somebody who has experience in that industry. You're not blindly trusting what the system is spitting out, but what you're doing is essentially, one, challenging, two, letting the system know whether it's right or not. If it's right, good, next time you're going to get the same or better response. If it's not, it helps the system evolve and train itself going forward to eventually reach a point where the companies are going to start accepting some decisions.
And I would just add on, I think for me anyway, if I really simplify AI and how it appeals to the masses, if we think about Siri, Google, and Alexa, that has essentially transformed how we live and do. I mean, if I just think about how I listen to music and stream or get directions to go find a place anywhere I am in the world, what is giving me that answer? Well, it's AI. And I think that's created a lot of trust just because of the accuracy and the experience that is driving a lot of this curiosity to see it go 1, 2, and 3 steps further.
Great, and thank you for the last minute question and clarification. We're basically at time now, so thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you again, Eli and Ankit, for sharing all your insights. You can tell that this is a very interesting topic for everyone. So for everyone who's attended today, and if there's anyone you know who registered and wasn't able to attend, you'll receive the recording in an email. So we hope that you enjoyed, and thanks again for coming. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest
Thanks,
of your day.
everyone.